Greetings everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is going to be general messages for the sign of Capricorn from the Lenormand in the form of a grand tableau for December 2019. I have been reading Lenormand for about 7 years now. I noticed that there really wasn't a whole lot of grand tableau action here on YouTube, so I thought I'd give this a shot. So without too much further ado, let's go ahead and begin. What are the messages for Capricorn for December 2019? Messages for Capricorn for December 2019. I feel like we're ready. Look at that. So our first card is the Sun, and here's our first significator, the Man. House, tree, and dog, ship, whip, the coffin, and the snake. The book, and letter, birds, the anchor, the moon in the garden, the writer, the ways, and the bouquet, the bear, scythe, and cross, the tower, fox, the clouds, the ring, and heart. And key. Fish, the mountain, stork, the child, clover, and our second significator, the woman, the lilies, stars, and our final card, the rats. So Capricorn, for those of you who are perhaps already familiar, let me see if I can just straighten you up a little bit here. For those of you who are already familiar with the Lenormand and how we navigate our way through the Grand Tableau, you'll know that we have two significators here. Generally, in a one-on-one reading, we would take the person in front of us And if that person is a woman, we look at the woman and the cards around her, and we look at the signatures there. Likewise, if the querent is a man, we look at him, his placement, and the signatures around him. Because in these readings, we're looking for general messages and salient themes for a large group of people, a very large group of people, for the entire month. You'll notice that I kind of manipulate the rules a little bit, which in my book is always okay, and we'll kind of bounce back and forth, perhaps, off of both of these significators, pardon me. So Capricorn, the thing that really stands out to me first, I feel as though you have this sense of being caught inside of yourself. There's a sense of trying to express yourself to the outside world, trying to get a message out. Perhaps it's to your friends, perhaps it's to one specific person. Trying to express something outward, but feeling like you're locked away. There's that feeling of being caught up in the head, being locked away in your own head. For me, that rings out very, very clearly in the way these cards are placed. So the first card, the card that is in the position of the writer, this is the energy that is moving into your life. The house of the writer signifies that which is being made manifest in your life, the growing energy. We have the sun, and the sun is a very general, it's a positive card. It represents enlightenment. It signifies understanding, consciousness, seeing things for the way they are, and in that way, liberating yourself from confusion, from unnecessary emotional ties, enlightenment in that sense. And I kind of am looking at the sun through the lens of the book. I feel like you have come to understand something in the past. Recently, you have learned something. You have gained a piece of knowledge. And because of that, it's drastically changed the way that you think about a given situation. You're questioning your sense of stability because of something that you have learned. You have learned something that's put yourself, your sense of stability, your sense of outward identity into a state of flux. And I feel like the growing energy in the month of December is how you're going to be able to express that outward and what that is going to look like in your life. Now, I understand that those are very, very broad things to say. So perhaps, when we look at this maybe in the context of a relationship, perhaps you've learned something about your partner. Perhaps you've learned something about yourself if you're not currently partnered and you are dating or you're trying to meet somebody. You've learned something about your emotional processes, the weird little quirks that we all have when we're kind of developing an infatuation with somebody. Or for those of you who are neither partnered nor are you looking, for me, there's very much an interpersonal quality to this. Something about the way that you communicate your inner landscape to the outer world. So right next to the book, which is that element of wisdom, that element of something being learned, sun, book, we have the letter, which I realize is difficult to see with the way that I overlap the cards, and also the birds. Both of these are cards of communication, inner and outer communication. The letter is, well, I should start, I suppose, with the birds. The birds is overt communication. It's chatter, outwardly expressive. Letter is more about subtext. It's more about the things that we communicate when we are saying nothing at all. And I feel like this process of communication, the way that you communicate, the way that you represent yourself, the presentation of you, Capricorn, to the outer world, has been shaken by something that has just happened to you. And I think it's kind of given you this sense of almost like a mini crisis, right? So just below these issues of communication, we have scythe and cross. So the scythe is a separation, but separation based on utility. It's taking two things and looking at them in an objective way and deciding this is useful, this is not useful, so I'm going to throw this thing out, right? The scythe, and whenever I see the scythe, I always kind of mentally remind myself of what a scythe is for. The scythe separates the wheat from the chaff. That which has utility and that which doesn't. The scythe has the felt sense of a surgeon's scalpel. It cuts through the BS in this sense. And that's placed very closely to the cross, which is that element of it being critical, or at least it feeling critical. It gives me this sense that this is something that's it's weighing very, very heavily on you. And directly in front of the significator is the house. So on its surface level, the house is going to be an actual house. It could also be any small building. It can represent the physical body, like the vesture that we all live in. It also has an inner quality, your inner life. So if, for example, the garden is like the outward expression, the public self, the house is going to be the inner self, the parts of you that nobody else can see. Maybe not necessarily your subconscious, but, you know, we all have those things that, behaviors or inner monologues that we have, behaviors that, you know, you only do when you're alone, you know, the secret self. That's the house. It brings to me this idea that this changing in the way that you see yourself and how you relate to the people around you, this change in your interpersonal relationships, what you communicate, how you communicate it, the ease with which you communicate it. It feels very critical. It feels, you know, like a big change. Something has really thrown you off balance, and you're taking a very, very hard look and critical look with the scythe at how you express yourself to other people. I think in particular for some of you, it's going to be pertinent that It's always good to have this inner process, and it's always good to, um, go on an inner journey. If that means you need to step away from having a super active social life, that's always fine. But I think for many of you, if this resonates as true, if you do find yourself in positions where you're questioning, who am I showing up as to these people, to this person, to my coworkers, to my partner, to my friends, you do need to guard yourself against coming across as too distant or too stubborn, like you're hibernating, or those times, we all experience times where we feel like we have to just kind of walk out of the world a little while. And I feel like that could be your inclination this month. For many of you of the sign of Capricorn, it feels as though there's going to be this kind of trigger that throws you for a loop and starts you on these mind games. And your natural inclination, Bear, Tower, is going to be to just disappear for a little while, to just retreat. And here, there's a clustering here that causes me to think that these issues are going to be heavily tied with relationships. And I'll show you what I have. So we have Rider, the Ways, Bouquet. I mean, really, it's this whole quadrant right here. Rider, Ways, Bouquet, Ring, Heart, Key. This significator is here. Above her is the clouds, lilies, stars, and in the corner here, one of the cornerstones of the spread is the rats. So the Rider, as we said here, the Rider is the first card. The significance of the Rider is that it will always show us the energy that is coming towards you, that which is arriving, that which is growing in your life. Generally, the Rider does speak to positive things coming. I will say that in my practical experience and in my daily draws, that's certainly not always the case. Certainly not always the case. So here we have Rider, and the Rider seems to be facing and galloping towards the paths. So paths speak to decisions, speak to options. The paths speak to, it's a crossroads, but it's not really like a figure X, it's a figure Y crossroad where you have to choose left or right, because continuing on is simply not an option. It's arriving at an ultimatum. And above the Ways, we have the Coffin. The Coffin is that sense of making a decision and gavel down. It's finality. It's also very utilitarian in nature, much like the Scythe is, in the sense that it's very cold. It's not an emotional card. I've said this before in other videos. When we think about what coffins are, they do one thing. We only use them one time. we put something in them, and we put that thing in the ground, and we never ever see it again, unless in some extraordinary circumstance. And in that, the coffin has an open shut quality. It's simple. These are decisions that are almost like decisions that have to make themselves. Decisions that are so obvious or so black and white, pardon me, that it's like a decision that's made itself before you've had a chance to have any type of emotional attachment to this or that. Which kind of brings me back to what I said at the beginning. I feel it's though something has been revealed to you. You have found something out. A difficult piece of information. And now you're in this space where you have to make decisions, but those decisions are actually impossible to make. Impossible to make because you really don't have a choice. I think, and below that, we have ring, heart, key. So, the ring on a topical level can be commitments, stick-to-itiveness. It's also cyclical in nature, with the ring being a circle. The heart can represent all of the emotions of the heart. It is the significator for your love life or for any interpersonal relationship. But really, it represents the entire array of emotions, everything that we can possibly feel. And the key is almost like a exclamation point, or that which is necessary. I feel like if this resonates with you, I will go further and say that if you have found something out, a difficult piece of information about a partner, a difficult piece of information about maybe your coworkers, a difficult piece of information about your friend group, this is actually an emotional response, or something in this for you has a familiar taste. It's like you found something out and you're not really sure what you're going to do, but you're really caught up in your head about it here, and you're not sure how you're going to communicate that outwardly to other people. And that kind of crisis of, what do I say? Do I say anything? How do I say it? That is something that you've been through multiple times before with yourself, with this specific person or people. It feels old to you. It's repetitive, but it feels old. And I say that we have whip and the lilies. The whip is repetitive in nature. It's also that feeling of castigation. It's not a positive card. And lilies, old, cool, removed. It's like you're experiencing an emotional trigger that is very familiar to you. And ultimately, that in itself is going to be your greatest source of wisdom, because this is actually something that you've had to deal with, and an energy that you've had to contend with before in the past. With the rats being here. So I think when we look at the 4 cornerstones of the spread, it kind of gives us what is your medicine for this month. We have sun, the snake, mice, or rats, pardon me, and the fish. And to echo what I said over here about perhaps having that inclination to kind of just disappear from the world for a little bit, or withdraw into yourself in whatever way that looks like for you. Maybe it's just spending a little bit more alone time. Pardon me. I think these 4 cards echo that, because in your ability to be alone and to sit with your personal experience, you're going to be able to experience a lot of internal wisdom that you have gained from past experiences that allows you to slowly step out. The rats is a card of reduction. It is a card of things, of eating away at things, one bite at a time. I think that in this sense, the wisdom is that you are going to get through this one small piece at a time. And it's going to be that feeling of like, okay, I'm walking 3 steps forward and then 1 step back today. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with having to make this decision, and then maybe 2 days later, you're freaking out about it. You're back in bed crying again. Maybe in the morning you get out of bed, you don't feel so triggered, but in the evening you feel super triggered again and you don't know what you're going to do. And then by the time you get into bed that evening, a little bit later on, you feel totally fine again. That's the benefit of you retreating a little bit into yourself, into your own quietude, wherever you can find that in your life, or wherever you can responsibly make space for that in your life. That's the benefit, is that you can nibble away at this crisis period. You can come to terms with this one bite at a time, little by little. And that's what's going to help you get through this. Capricorn, I hope this helped. Again, these are strong cards. At least for me, from the way that I look at these, there does seem to be a very definitive message, and it does sound very heavy, but nonetheless, with this being, something that I do think you've dealt with before, I do think that you are fully accustomed, you do have an emotional toolkit already in place to deal with this. I guess the greater message, looking at all of this and kind of thinking back over everything that I said, it would be that you need to be brave enough to give yourself the permission to retreat, and to maybe take a step back and take a step back into yourself after having experienced whatever you experienced, after having learned whatever you learned. Give yourself permission to take a step away And if you're able to do that, and if you're able to commit to abiding with this difficult period, with this critical energy, and not trying to run from it or hide from it, I do have a lot of faith that you're going to be able to get through this and get out into the other side. Capricorn, I'll be sending you all of my good vibes. Again, my name is Gabriel. I plan on continuing to do these, I don't even know what you would call it, Lenormand scopes for all of the signs every month. In addition to Lenormand, I read an oracle called La Vera Sibilla. It's an 18th century Italian oracle. It's read similarly in some ways to the Lenormand. You may see that here as well. And in addition, I do read tarot, so that could make an appearance here as well. So please feel free to give me any feedback, anything like that. But until next time.